we have come to the next topic, that is dealing with the database accessing. Okay, so let us start with that. Uh, so in Microsoft.NET, there is a special object, that is special library actually, that is given for dealing with the database access, and how it is implemented, and what are the procedures to get connected to your any kind of database. Yeah. So let us see with the ADO.NET overview. Uh, what is ADO.NET? ADO.NET provides a set of classes for working with the data. Okay, so that means some special libraries are written only to deal with the databases. You may work with Microsoft SQL Server, okay, Microsoft MS SQL Server, or you may be dealing with Oracle, or you may be dealing with MySQL or DB2. Many number of database providers are there. So exclusively what this ADO.NET is doing is, it is offering some wrappers. Okay, so it is offering some wrappers so that the behind the scene complexity is completely um, obscured for you. That means you don't see what is exactly happening with that particular typical database, because every database, every RDBMS software is having its own unique flavor, as well as their drivers are different. Okay, so all these issues are generally wrapped in the ADO.NET classes. And what as a programmer you need to know is, we just have to use some couple of classes so that seamlessly you are getting access irrespective of the database nature or the proprietorship of the database. Okay, so it's an evolutionary, more flexible successor to the ADO. So previously that technique was there, which is called as ActiveX data object. So the meaning of the ADO is ActiveX data object. Now in the .NET, it was again taken from the object-oriented paradigm. So that's why it is written exclusively uh, with the C# structure. So ADO.NET is offering the same ADO, but in a fully object-oriented compliant manner. And this is a system designed for disconnected environments. We will understand what is connected architecture and one is the disconnected architecture. Then a programming model with advanced XML support. Okay, so everything is actually written down to XML basically. You can see even in the migrations also, whenever you are taking the data, it is nothing but creating the structure basically compatible with the XML supports. Then a set of classes, interfaces, structures, and enumeration that manage data access from within the .NET framework. So ADO.NET is offering some certain classes, it is exposing some interfaces and some structures, enumerations. So all these are part of this particular library, which is called as ADO.NET. Okay. So then we have namespaces, which are specially dealing with this ADO.NET. You can see if you are using this VB, the first block is showing the code of the VB. You have to import basically the particular namespace of system.data and then system.data.sql client. So SQL client is only for the MS SQL servers. Okay, it's only working for the Microsoft SQL servers. And parallelly, if you are running the C# code, you have to use this keyword using. Okay, so the namespace is same. The namespace is same. Okay, so system.data, that is the root namespace, then system.data.sql client, which is the additional library that you need to import first of all in your code file so that you can access the ADO.NET file, ADO.NET libraries. Okay, so what are the basic namespaces comprising with this ADO.NET is, first one is, this is the root namespace for the databases handling, that is it is equipped with the data sets, it is equipped with the data reader. So in that way, some peculiar objects are required to manipulate the database connections. So that is given with the system.data. Second one is data.sql client. As I have said, this is working with the working for the MS SQL servers. It's actually used for the MS SQL servers. That means Microsoft based versions only it will able to run. And second one is able to run the different set of databases. That can be Oracle, that can be MySQL. MySQL is something different, okay? So it's not MS SQL. Okay, so you can take the MySQL, then you can take DB2. So those different RDBMS softwares, if ever you want to connect, then you can take this OLEDB. Then no, it is actually for the ODBC. Then OLEDB for the embedded databases like this is actually this. Then this is this. So it is accessing the Access files, then MS Excel files. So in that way, the set of functionalities are given opened up with the particular namespaces. So mainly whenever you are dealing with the .NET application, so this is the first way of connecting the things, because naturally the compliance will be more on the SQL servers. So most of the times if you are working in the companies, you may be getting connected to the MS SQL servers, but it is not limited to that. If you want to have any additional software, RDBMS software, or you want to directly take your database as Oracle, so these are also there. So it is not a restriction, but they have given different supporting libraries for that. So this is one library, SQL client. OLEDB is the second library, and ODBC is the third library. So these DLLs or libraries are actually supported under the ADO.NET library. So then how it is actually working? So this object model we come to see. So whether you are taking this SQL server, or you may be implementing some fundamental OLEDB sources. That means you can access from Access, or you can take the MS Excel, or maybe some SQL previous instances. If you want to connect previous instances, means SQL Server 6.5 previous to this particular version, all these are capable to served under this library OLEDB.NET. Okay, so most of the time as you are going through with your current project, so anytime you can simply take with this SQL Server dependency, and for that what you need is system.sql client. So this system.sql client is offering some different objects like SQL connection, SQL data adapter, and SQL data providers. So these are specific to the SQL connections, and accordingly these are offering some compatibility or some interfaces to the middleware as well as to the databases, so that to get the data loaded into the memory. So this data set is nothing but the memory representation of the database. So this data set is containing multiple data tables also. Like you are having a physical database, you can create with your own database dynamically at runtime, and it can equate multiple data tables, and you can query some data from this data set also. So it's not the actual database, it's the virtual representation of your actual database. So it's not the actual database, it's a virtual representation of your existing database. Okay, so similarly if you are taking ODBC connections also, some wrappers are there, and OLEDB, there is a OLEDB connection, then OLEDB data adapter, similarly OLEDB.NET provider. So the classes are something different, but the purpose of those classes are very much similar to their counterparts. So whether you are getting connected from SQL Server or some Oracle server, only the compatibility classes are there, and which are very much similar. You will come to know after seeing those objects. Okay, so this is the way how this is going to be connected, and accordingly after this particular data set is completely loaded into the memory, you can directly take the data from the data set. Initially, for the first time, you are going to load the data from the databases. For the subsequent calls, you may not be bothering the database every time, but rather taking the data directly from the in-memory representation of your database, that is nothing but your data set. Okay, so this is a highly scalable kind of approach for your applications, and one data set may contain multiple data tables, and you can relate them by using some special conditions also, and you all these come to know in the programming. So basically client makes a request, okay, So then it will, the web server is actually whatever the logic that you have written in your code behind file, that is actually being run by the web server. And then this web server, as per your namespace, it will connect to the SQL connection. Okay, so that means you are connecting to a MS SQL server. SQL connection is only for the MS SQL server. So this SQL server is getting connected. And then what happens? The database is getting populated with the data set. Okay, so one time loading of that particular query is going to be filled up with the required data set. This data set is connected from the data adapter, and that data adapter will actually interfacing with that. The data adapter is nothing but an adapter. Okay, so the nature of the adapter is to take the data and accordingly convert into the required format. Okay, so then what it does, after getting the data, it simply closes the connection. Now you have the data directly in your database, not data set, not in your physical database. Okay, so finally where you got the data loaded on the first time running, it is directly loaded in the data set. Okay, so from the subsequent times, client actually deals with the data set only. Okay, so client manipulates the data, and whatever you want to update or simply select or insert any kind of operation, he is going to do that only in the data sets, not in this actual database. Okay, so everything is actually implemented in this data sets. It is a virtual representation. Okay, so after manipulations done by the client, because the client may be selecting something, doing the updations, again writing the data into the data set, again he is querying something, again he has done something. So in that way, the many manipulations he can incorporate in the data set. Finally, before completion, what he will do is he will again open the data adapter. Okay, so thereby he is connecting to this database, and what he does is he will update the database with that whatever the changes that were incorporated from this data set. Okay, so जितना भी client ने data set में manipulate किया है, उसको पूरा का पूरा वो क्या करेगा, finally database में write करेगा. So in that way, your database is actually getting synchronized, but with only couple of calls. एक बार डेटा लेने के लिए एंड मल्टीपल टाइम्स डेटा सेट में ऑपरेट करने की वजह से क्या होगा, आपका डेटाबेस के ऊपर प्रेशर एंड लोड कम रहेगा. ओके, सो द स्केलेबिलिटी विल बी हाई, द नेटवर्क availability, the database availability to different customers is also high, and you are offering a better performance directly loaded from the data set, not every time connected to the physical database. So in that way, your clients also see much faster responses which are directly coming from database, a data set. So in that way, data set offers many advantages. It sits between your database and your end user, and thereby it offers much higher performance than the regular traditional kind of programming. That first of all you need to understand. Okay, so what is the advantage of having the data set is it tremendously increases the responsiveness of your application for the clients, because nothing is being actually accessed from the physical database, but rather it is getting directly served from the data sets. Okay, so that's why it is highly scalable, and your users also will have the much better response from your application. That is the best advantage on the data set. So this is a typical way of doing the things that we will see in the practical slots. So then data adapter, this is special object. Okay, so data adapter is there to manipulate the database and to serve to your application. And you can see there is a physical database. Okay, so this physical database is offering the connection from the some library like SQL client. Okay, so through this SQL client, you have to create this instance of this class connection. So if you are working on MS SQL Server, what you have to write, connection SQL client con is equal to new SQL client. So that is why the connection is being instanced. So after this creation of this connection, it is able to take the commands. So there is a command object. This is the first object, and this is the second object. The command object can be select command, or it can be update command, or it can be insert command, or it can be delete command. So the CRUD operation commands you can have in your code, and if you are using the select operations, then you may be depending on this data reader. So data reader is one more object through which you can actually read the data. Suppose you have loaded 10,000 rows, so all these 10,000 rows one by one you can access from this data reader object. And then for the rest of the manipulation objects like update, insert, and delete, you do not require data reader. Simply the command is being sent to the adapter, whether it can be an update command, or it can be an insert command, or it can be the delete command. So finally what this data adapter will do is, the data adapter will similarly apply the things in the data set, and finally the data set is going to be modified. And after some manipulations of this data set, and once the processing is done by the client for some time, like he has used the database manipulations for 10 minutes, after the 10 minutes time is over, finally the dataset changes are going to be written again back into the database. So the nature of the propagation of the things is same. Again, it will send to the data adapter. Data adapter accordingly will fire the required object, and accordingly the connection will be used for making those changes into the database. Okay. So this is the code how to create this data adapter. Again, we will see in the practical slot exclusively. For the time being, we can see and understand a particular new instance of this SQL data adapter by providing the query and some connection object we have to specify. Through that, we can able to connect to your connection, and connection is actually established to your particular end database. After getting connected, you require this dataset object also. Like with the case of this is one adapter object. Okay, so you require this object also. Then we require this dataset object also. The dataset, this is the in-memory representation of your actual database. So that instance we are going to create. Then through that data adapter, we are going to fill up the data with this in this dataset. See, this is the dataset that we have created. Okay, so all these things we will exclusively see in the practical slots, and here we can see how this code is actually getting connected, getting used for providing the adapters and some queries, how this adapter is getting filled up with the data sets, and this is the in-memory representation of the tables. Okay, so the name of the table can be same. The physical table name is customers, but you can take another name to that customers, so that you are actually saving the data into some virtual data table. So it can be the same name, or it can be some alternative name also. Then we got some data aware controls also. So controls that connect to your data source and display the data. So what they are, first one is drop down list, and then list box, then checkbox list, radio button list, then data grid, data list, repeater. All these are actually data aware list bound controls. Data aware list bound controls means you can bind the data to these controls. You can bind the data. Suppose you have a drop down list. Okay, so from your database you want to populate this drop down list with some countries information. Okay, so you got the list of some 300 countries in the database. All these countries information you will populate dynamically into this control, so that user is going to select any given country from that drop down list. Suppose you are registering from India, in the countries drop down list you have to select the India. So in that way, all this data which is coming from the database, you can tie up, you can bind. Okay, so you can actually tie up the data in the data aware controls. So there are many controls, like this list box also you can do the same thing. The purpose is different. Drop down list can be selected with a single value, but list box can be selected with multiple values. Similar case with the checkbox list. Multiple values you can select, but in the case of the radio button list, any set of given values, only unique value can be selected from the given values of some set of countries or some set of some users. You can only select a single user or country. So in that way, the data grid is only showing to the data in a matrix format, and there are repeaters and there are data lists also. So the nature and behavior of all these controls is controls are something different, and on practice you will come to know when and where you have to take a specific kind of control. Okay, so that depends on the implementation, what you are going to prepare in your user interface. Suppose you want to select the country, then the best thing is you are depending on this drop down list. In that case, you don't require data grid or you don't require repeater. Okay, so some specific conditions there. In those conditions, you want to select either of these controls, and only with the practice you will come to know where to use a specific control and which is best suited in the given situation. Then displaying the dataset in data list bound controls. So all these are data aware controls. Okay, so some data source you need to put to those controls. How to give this data source is, your data source is nothing but the data set, actually the in-memory representation of your database. Okay, and what is the data member? The data member is nothing but your data table. See, this is the in-memory representation of your database. Okay, so the entire database you can take, but normally we do not take entire database. You can have couple of tables or mostly some 10 to 15 tables which are most frequently used. It's not the case like your database is having some 1,000 tables. You are fetching all those 1,000 tables into dataset. It will be a performance penalty. So whatever is the required tables, only you are going to fetch into this dataset. Then what is the data table? It's a combination of the tables available in the dataset. There can be 10 tables, there can be 15 tables virtually presented in the memory, and those are called as data tables and which are available in the dataset. Okay, then the text field is there, then the value field is there. Text field means what you want to show to the user. Suppose a country is having some value as well as the name. India is a country, its value for your database is 11. Okay, so America is a country, for the value maybe some 70. So the values are being attached to that particular control by showing the name of the country in the text field. So that is the way of accessing the data from your code. Suppose you may be requiring the text field. Suppose you want to search the data by the country name. Sometimes you want to search the data by the values provided, because it will be best performed, because it basically depends on the numerical values, and the fetches will be much faster than the text-based searching. So all these are the part of the database implementations where the performance you need to consider sometimes, and where sometimes flexibility is actually what you require. Okay, so accordingly you are going to put all these properties. First one is data source, second one is data member, that is the table name, value field and text field. By combining all these things, what you are doing is you are binding that data to the given controls. All these things, they are applicable to these controls in a common way. आप इसके साथ भी वही करेंगे, इसके साथ भी वैसे ही करेंगे कोडिंग, इसके साथ भी वैसे ही करने वाले हैं. The binding will be done automatically to that respective control. So similar coding is there. आपको अलग अलग controls होने के बाद भी coding will be very much similar. And there is an example which is given for the Windows form actually. So we have taken data grid to show the data, and we require the data source and the data member properties also, and we require this data set also. Okay, so data grid is the user interface control. Data grid is the user interface control. Data source, data member, data set, all are the virtual objects which you want to create from the code behind file. Okay, so in this way of coding, you will see the coding. The coding will be looking like this. This is a SQL statement. Then one connection object you need to establish. Then you have to take the dataset object, okay, and we are instantiating the connection object here. Then you are going to instantiate one data adapter also, and to that adapter you are providing these details, the connection detail, okay. Then your query, this is the query you are passing, and finally what you are doing is you are filling up the data set with this virtual name of the employees table through this adapter. So this is how the things are actually being connected. And finally, after loaded into the data set, okay, you are going to have one data view object also, in which you want to see the tables which is having with this name, employees table in the data table, and your data source is now visualizing the content which is coming from the data view. And that's all. Finally, you have to call this method data by. So the steps are pretty simple. Simple in the sense, first of all, you have to make a connection object, then you have to provide the SQL query. Those steps we have done up till here. Then you are going to create an adapter. To that adapter, you want to send all these details of whatever you have created, the connection and the command. Then you want to fill up the data to the required data set. This data set is actually being populated with the tables list which is containing with this name, employees. And finally, the data view you want to attach to the grid. This is the grid. So in that way, you can have the so this is some C# code, and this is the VB code. No, this is C# code. Both are same actually. One is for the OLEDB and one is for the SQL client. Only that is the difference. And in the case of the SQL client, you can see SQL connection, SQL data adapter, and the classes are started with SQL. And whereas in the case of the OLEDB, you can see the classes or name also very much same, but it is started with the OLEDB connection, OLEDB data adapter, and that is only the difference actually. Otherwise, the things, the way of coding the things, and is very much similar across all the databases. Okay. So in this edu.NET, one particular concept which is actually we have skipped is we have seen that edu.NET is actually offering service to the disconnected environments also. Okay. So what is a connected environment? Suppose you have a Windows application. That Windows application is connected to your end database, because ultimately Windows application is actually basically we have to know there are two kinds of connecting the things. One is connected way of connected architecture, and one is disconnected architecture. Okay, so disconnected architecture means you will just connect to the database for a single time, and you will load the things, and the database connection is closed instantly, and from then on you are going to manipulate with that disconnected with that database in the disconnected mode only, because the data is sent to the client, and now his client is having the actual data representation in the in-memory with the case of the data set. Okay, so the data set is nothing but the in-memory representation of your database. So after doing n number of operations from this data set, finally you are going to again open the database and fill up with the whatever the changes that you have incorporated. So this is what the disconnected architecture offers. So why this is important? Because in the time of the scalability, because your application may be connected with 1 million users, so it is not possible for the database applications 1 million connections can be provided to all the users. So it is simply difficult. Okay, so in those conditions, as a best programmer, you can take advantage of the disconnected environments where user will not be bothered about the ultimate performance or the hardware scalability issues. Simply you are providing with the data transparently by taking advantage of these in memory representation. But sometimes we have to make use of the connected way of architecture also, in which your database is kept open and all the operations are actually directly being done on the physical database. So that is the connected way of doing the things. So that is the connected way of the doing the things. Second one is disconnected mode. Disconnected mode operate करने के लिए we take the data set. Connected mode के लिए the name of the object is data reader. Okay, so the data reader. So there are two kinds of objects are there. Connected architecture is provided through this object. Disconnected architecture is provided through this object.